Hello and welcome to Excel Mathematics TV. This presentation will be about estimating with fractions. There are several types of fractions and one of them is a mixed number. Let's learn how to estimate mixed numbers. This process is very easy. Just round it to the nearest whole number to estimate their sum, difference, product, and quotient. The number line can help us do that. If the fraction part of a mixed number is between 0 and 1/2, we round down to the next whole number. For example, 3 2/10 fraction part is between 0 and 1/2, since 2/10 is 1/5 when simplified. Then 3 2/10 is rounded to 3. On the other hand, if the fraction is between 1/2 and 1, we round up to the next whole number. For example, 3 9/10 fraction part is between 1/2 and 1. Then 3 9/10 is rounded to 4. If the fraction is exactly 1/2, we also round up to the next whole number. Say we have 3 1/2. It will become 4 when rounded. Let's apply what we learned and solve some examples. We will estimate the sum of 8 1/3 and 5 3/4. Adding these mixed numbers, like this, will take a lot of time. To make everything simple and easy, we will round each addend before adding. Let's start by rounding 8 1/3. As you can see, the fraction part of 8 1/3, which is 1/3, is between 0 and 1/2. Then 8 1/3 is rounded down to 8. Next, we'll round the second addend. The fraction part of 5 3/4 is between 1/2 and 1. Then 5 3/4 is rounded to 6. Now the two addends are rounded to the nearest whole numbers. It's easier to add them. So we have 8 1/3 plus 5 3/4 is about 8 plus 6. Adding gives us 14. Thus the sum is about 14. Let's have another example. Let's estimate 6 1/2 times 2 3/7. We will follow the same procedure. The only difference is that this time, the operation involved is multiplication. So let's round the first factor, 6 1/2. The fraction part is 1/2, right? Remember that if the fraction is 1/2, we round up to the nearest whole number. Then 6 1/2 is rounded to 7. Next, let's proceed to rounding the second factor, 2 3/7. 3/7 is less than 1/2. That means it is between 0 and 1/2. Then 2 3/7 is rounded down to 2. Now the given expression is about 7 times 2. Multiplying 7 and 2 gives us 14. Thus the product is about 14. Moving forward to the next topic, let's learn how to estimate fractions. Since we were able to estimate mixed numbers, this will be easy because the process is very similar. Just round the fractions to the nearest 0, 1/2, or 1 to estimate their sum, difference, product, and quotient. To help us estimate fractions easier, we can also use a number line or a model. Remember, when the value of a numerator is much smaller than the value of the denominator, we round the fraction to 0. On the other hand, when the value of the numerator is almost half the value of the denominator, we round the fraction to 1/2. Finally, when the value of a numerator is close to the value of the denominator, we round the fraction to 1. In order to understand the concept even more, let's have some examples of each situation we mentioned earlier. Some fractions that are close to 0 are 1/4 and 2/9. As you can see, the numerators are much smaller than their denominator, so they close to 0. Now let's see some examples of a fraction that close to 1/2. We have 6/10 and 5/7. Some fractions that are closer to 1 are 7/8 and 9/11. You see, the numerators are close to their denominators. Let's apply what we learned and solve some examples. Let's estimate the following expressions. We have 1/9 plus 4/5, 11/13 minus 7/9, and 13/15 divided by 5/6. Let's solve the first one. We have 1/9 plus 4/5. Before performing the indicated operation, we'll round the fractions first. The first term is 1/9. Let's see how we can round it. You see, 1/9 is about 0 because the numerator is much smaller than its denominator. Then 1/9 is rounded to 0. Next, let's round 4/5. The numerator is 4 and it is close to the denominator, which is 5. Therefore, 4/5 is about 1. Then we round 4/5 to 1. We're done rounding the two terms. Applying what we did, we now have 1/9 plus 4/5 is about 0 plus 1. Now, let's perform the indicated operation. Adding gives us 1. Thus, the sum is about 1. Now, let's solve the second example. Let's estimate the difference between 11 over 13 and 3/4. The process is the same as the previous example. We will round each term before subtracting. First, we'll round 11 over 13. What do you see? The numerator is very close to its denominator, so we can say that 11 over 13 is about 1. Then 11 over 13 is rounded to 1. For the remaining term, we will round 3/4. Remember that 3/4 and 2/3 are usually rounded to 1/2. So even if the numerator is close to its denominator, we will still round it to 1/2. Thus, 3/4 is rounded to 1/2. After rounding, we now have 11 over 13 minus 3/4 is about 1 minus 1/2. Subtracting gives us 1/2. Thus, the difference is about 1/2. Let's solve the fifth example. We will round 13 over 15 divided by 5/6. Remember that when the value of a numerator is close to the value of the denominator, we round the fraction to 1. As usual, we will round the first term, 13 over 15. As you see, 13 is very close to 15, so 13 over 15 is rounded to 1. Moving to the second term, let's round 5/6. As you can see, 5 is very close to 6. Then 5/6 is rounded to 1. Now that all the terms are rounded, the expression 13 over 15 divided by 5/6 is about 1 divided by 1. This is easy to divide. Remember, any number divided by 1 is equal to the number itself. Since the number we are dividing is also 1, the answer is 1. Thus, the quotient is about 1. Let's move on to the next topic. Do you know what compatible numbers are? These are numbers close to the value of the actual numbers that are easy to compute mentally. We use compatible numbers to easily solve expressions. Let's apply that concept and estimate by using compatible numbers. First, we have 1/2 times 17. Multiplying gives us 17 over 2. This is not yet in its simplest form, so we need to divide the numerator by its denominator in order to simplify it. It's not easy to divide 17 by 2 mentally, because 17 is not divisible by 2. What we're going to do is round 17 to 18, since 18 is divisible by 2, and this is easier to divide. Now, 1/2 times 17 is about 1/2 times 18. Multiplying gives us 18 over 2, so we will simplify the product that we got. We all know that 18 divided by 2 is 9. Thus, the product is about 9. Let's solve the last example. Estimate 15 and 9/10 divided by 8 and 2/3. To estimate this, we will round each mixed number. First, round 15 and 9/10. 9 is very close to 10, right? Then we round up to the next whole number. Therefore, 15 and 9/10 is rounded to 16. Next, we will round 8 and 2/3. For this one, we will apply the concept of compatible numbers. We'll round 8 and 2/3 to 8, since 16 is divisible by 8. We can solve it mentally this way. Now 15 and 9/10 divided by 8 and 2/3 is about 16 divided by 8. And we can solve this mentally. Dividing gives us 2. Thus, the quotient is about 2. That's it for this lesson about estimating with fractions. It surely is useful to know how to estimate fractions. It makes solving easier and faster. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.